For the last few years, us humans have had to count fingers and toes to catch out AI. But today I'm going to see if we can turn the tables and make police AI do the counting. So recently in my state, the police have rolled out the latest in AI-based road safety cameras to catch people using their mobile phone while driving. These cameras can see deep into your car day or night, with the AI not only able to detect and report people using their phone while they are driving, but also to find them for other things like not wearing seatbelts, doing dashboard spreadies, and having paintwork. The problem is though, despite them claiming the AI detection is reviewed by 3 humans before notices are sent out, a lot of people are getting hit with false positives for phone usage. Like you got this guy eating a Chico roll, or this woman who was sipping some water, who also got done for driving perfectly normal, and the same woman again demonstrating almost textbook driving form. And this is meant to have been reviewed by 3 humans. So if holding a hat, your wallet, or a fuel receipt is enough to land you in court, what is this new AI policing tech going to mean for my long-planned business idea of making human arm car phone holders? Let's find out if humans are in the loop with some challenges that would be detectable by a human reviewer, or if we are leaving our policing up to our new AI overlords. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all for road safety and getting people off their phones, especially with people doing dumb stuff like this. And seriously, who the f puts a baby on their lap while driving? Like, can you imagine the airbags going off in a crash? That's going to send the baby right back up your clacker where it came from. Then there's this bloke using a keyboard. I don't know, maybe he's got it plugged in and he's using the WASD keys for driving. And I don't even know what to say in regards to this one. This is disgraceful. Putting a smelly tree on your rear vision mirror is obviously an infringement of Regulation 263 of the WA Road Traffic Code 2000. Drivers to have uninterrupted and undistracted views, etc. Now, what is the tech they are using exactly? Well, I'm glad me asked you, Craig. In WA, they have a bunch of mobile trailers that they move around the state, which makes it hard for us to know where one is at any given time. But they've also installed 2 fixed locations on the freeway. Now, I think I've gone through these before, but not paid too much attention to them. But I think one is right there. That's one of the fixed installations. You can see the cameras along the bottom there. But I think we should head out tonight and see how it works. But also, free bit of wood. Definitely adding that to the collection. So I'm heading out at night because I want to try and see it operating in infrared using this old mini DV camera that has a night view option, which I actually used to film my first cat repellent video. But also going at night time because the traffic gets pretty shit in the day. I've pulled up and there's one of them just there. It looks like any of the other signage gantries you'd see on the freeway, but with this one, if we switch to infrared, there you go. It's flashing more than my wife did when she was getting out of the public swimming pool the other week. Looking more closely at the footage, it looks like it takes 3 images, maybe 4 of each car. But if that is the case, it's going to be dealing with a lot of images per day, so the AI system must be built in to filter out what it thinks are seatbelt and mobile phone offences, and then just uploads them somewhere where they may or may not be reviewed by 3 people before fines get sent out in the mail. To make this a fair test, we need to get a rough idea of what their camera sees. On hand, I do have this cheap pan-tilt zoom camera, which works day and night. So if we mount that to the roof of the shed, get it connected, let it do its little camera boot up dance, then we just need to bring in a car. And I reckon that camera angle looks pretty consistent with the images we've seen. Then if we just wait for nighttime, we can switch it over to infrared to see how it looks. Well, I can actually see how much fuel is left in a red jerry can. That's pretty cool. But panning back to the car, I reckon that matches quite well. I thought it would be pretty funny to do a pass inverted, but I can't really afford to lose my license at the moment, or die. And then I lost all my credit cards down the side of the seat. But this has given me a good idea of the position of the hand holder, which will go about here. So let's go build a human hand. Now we're not going to just use some kind of fake looking Halloween hand from eBay. I want this to be an anatomically perfect replica of my own hand and arm. So having a quick look online, apparently the right way to do this would be to buy a bag of alginate to produce a cast of my arm. But we don't do things properly on this channel because it's more fun. Plus, if I end up with a $1,000 fine, I really have to be cheap about this. So I am going to try and use the traditional ancient method of casting plaster, where you use plaster to make both the mould and then the final casting. And the good thing about this, plaster of Paris will actually work out way cheaper for the whole process. And lucky for me, years ago I accidentally ordered this 20-kilogram bag of plaster. Pasta is a different thing apparently. I don't know if it's still good because they reckon casting plaster only lasts for about a year on the shelf. But when in doubt, punch it out. I thought I'd start with a quick test batch to see if it still works. To vibrate the bubbles out, I figured using a massage gun would be a nice way to cheat, which worked pretty good. I then chucked a soda can in there to see if it would take a good casting impression of the can. While that was setting, I also wanted to test out the traditional way of giving plaster strength, which is by using hessian. I already had some on hand, which I normally provide as bedding when my in-laws stay with us. Using this, I'm going to dive straight in and try and do a test cast on my skin. I mixed up some more Stoner's porridge and basically just started pasting it on the big toe of my hand. Then we can start wrapping it in hessian while mashing more plaster in, which was all way more difficult than I thought it would be.
Oh, nah, it's too mushy.
I thought I'd check on the soda can mould, which should be a walk in the park. And that is a f***ing mess too. I probably should have realised the can would have a huge air bubble under it as I pressed it down. So far, at least we know the plaster is good and has a shelf life that is way longer than what it says on the bag. Having mastered no aspect of this, I reckon we step it up a notch and combine both techniques into one and see if we can take a detailed impression of this old bottle. I thought I might have better luck if I mixed up the plaster in a tray to soak the hessian better. Slapping that onto the bottle, I reckon this time we've got it. I kept layering it up until I had something that I was confident to remove. Just a grown man trying to put a vintage bottle in a wet nappy. I left it to set for an amount of time I'd be comfortable having something like this on my arm, and then removed its shell. And that is looking a bit better, still lots of dry bits. I almost feel like fiberglass is actually easier to work with than plaster, but where it has taken an impression, it's not looking too bad. Kristen saw my frustration and stepped in and said, yeah, I actually have some plaster bandages specifically for doing that. I haven't personally used these myself before, but I do remember having them applied to my leg once. So it doesn't fit the random requirement I placed on myself of using traditional techniques only, but it's going to be much easier. It kind of reminds me of a QR code. I almost had the phone convinced. Alright, I reckon we just jump in and do it. So the mould is going to be done in a way that's a bit like a clamshell made of two halves. So I've marked my arm in two halves in a way that I reckon will close together. I'm going to use a piece of plastic, the size of my phone, to hold my hand in the right phone holding pose while the plaster's going on. I've then just started wetting it and slapping that shit on. So I did some mass numbers, and it turns out when casting your own hand, it leaves you with only one other hand to do the procedure itself, which made it a bit tricky. I just kept layering them on piece by piece up to the lines that I drew on my arm. But this stuff goes on quite well and is already starting to firm up nicely. I've really concentrated on making sure I got the wet plaster right into all the little nooks and crannies. I kept layering them on all the way up my arm while it started to set, and it didn't take too long until I couldn't let go of the plastic surrogate phone, so it should be a firm fit for my real phone. But with it all set, I could then pull it out, which was surprisingly sharp.
I didn't sand the edges of it.
Oh, it's scratched.
Ah!
Thumbs up.
With that out, we can now remove the mould.
The hairs are ripping bad. Oh!
Yeah, so remember that whole bit where I skimped on the research? Well, it is pretty well bonded to every hair on my arm. I got my thumb out, but the crunch sounds is every individual hair being plucked out of my skin. Compared to various injuries throughout my life, this was actually surprisingly painful.
It's like slow waxing, I guess.
To avoid damaging the mould, I was going to cut my arm off, but Kristen reckons it would be more expensive to repair than just making another plaster mould. I paused the camera for a little bit to reconsider my life decisions, and then recommitted to a final effort of ripping the cast off. And there you go, we have half of the shell complete with most of my arm hair in it. And you can still see our QR code from earlier. Now we just need to clean up the rough edges of the mould and sand them smooth so it doesn't stick to the next half. And that is looking really good, if my goal is to convert myself into a crustacean. As for making a plaster mould, I'm really not sure yet. So to stop the next half of the mould sticking to this one, I'm going to put some petroleum jelly around the edges. And so I don't trap all the hairs on my arm again, I'm going to smother it on there as well. But I've just realised applying wet plaster on this side is going to be tricky. Doing stuff like this would have been heaps easier in the days before gravity was introduced into Australia. To get as much detail in my hand as possible, I'm pre-pasting my hand with plaster. Then I could start layering it on. Kristen helped out due to the whole gravity thing. I finished it up with some extra layers for additional strength. While it was setting, I went and grabbed a snack. And now I understand why hospitals leave the hand exposed when they do an arm cast. With that set, it's now just an easy case of removing the final half of the mould, which didn't seem to be giving the slightest hint of movement. It was glued tight.
It's not budging.
Let me know when you've started.
I'm not gonna lie. At this point, I had a cold sweat come over me, realizing there was an actual possibility I may end up needing to go to ER to have my arm removed from this thick block of bullshit. I feel like they'll probably be curious why I cast my entire arm and hand in a grip position, and I feel like, because I'm doing a commentary on road safety, isn't a good response. I thought about trying to use a box cutter to get it started, but for some reason Kristen took it off me and put it away on a high shelf. I stuck a steel ruler down there to see what was going on, and it seemed like the petroleum jelly did absolutely nothing. After a fair amount of work, we finally managed to get a gap going. Now I'm trying to play it cool on camera, but I've had some pretty graphic hand injuries that hurt less than this. It honestly feels like someone's dragging a knife down your arm repeatedly. But after a while, my arm finally hatched, and that has produced a crazy level of detail. I want this on my bike handles, the most ergonomic hand grip I'll ever experience. I then used a blowtorch to remove some of the hairs and arm meat from the mould, and ever since then, the shed smells like burnt keratin. I've tidied up some of the defects and made a nice seam where the two halves overlap, and this appears to be shaping up like a good mould for an arm. To make sure the plaster cast doesn't get stuck in the mould, I've sprayed it with acrylic gloss, just as they would have done in ancient Egypt. I then got thinking about how the final cast will be removed without getting destroyed, because it won't be made out of flexible Craig meat. I think the back half will peel away fine, but this front section will be gripped tight by the solid plaster version of myself. So I couldn't see any other way around it, other than strengthening the hand area and then sawing off my fingers, so the mould will now be in 4 pieces. Finally, I got coating the insides with some petroleum jelly, which left paintbrush pubes everywhere. But then I could tape and glue all the segments together, ready for pouring. Then the last thing I needed was some aluminium bones to go inside the arm. This will give it some extra strength and allow us to mount it securely in the car. To prepare it for the pour, I stood it up in a bucket with some polystyrene jammed in there, which seems to do the trick. For mixing up the plaster, I'm not exactly sure what the volume of my arm is, so I just went with the shitload measuring cup. I gave it a bit of stick, and then gave it a massage, and once all the bubbles were out, I kind of just went for it and poured it. And I don't know what I was thinking, but obviously all the tiny little holes around the edge of the mould just let all the plaster spew out into the bottom of the bucket. As a bonus kick in the teeth, I then realised there is a hole in the bucket, letting it all dump out onto the table as well. In an absolutely frantic effort before it set, I yanked the mould out of the bucket and started hot gluing the edges, like I should have done in the first place.
I don't trust that.
Yep, burnt the shit out of myself there. But then we were all good to have another go. Then the plaster leaked out into the hot glue, creating plaster hot glue bubbles. But luckily I had enough plaster mixed up so I could just keep pouring it in until the plaster bleeding stopped. I also stuck the aluminium bones in there, but I couldn't get a shot of that because my hands were busy plugging all the holes on the mould. Yes, it turns out this is how plaster moulding goes when you do little to no research. I then gave it some time to set. The cast of the bottom of the bucket turned out well, so we are now ready to unzip our hand phone cradle from its plaster tomb. Straight away, the hand is looking really good, but it became obvious the mould wasn't going to survive another casting.
It's like an arm popsicle. Oh no, the thumb!
The section around the fingers was really messed up, but as it slowly revealed itself, it was shaping up pretty awesome. This is what it must have been like when they dug up the ancient civilization of plaster people who lived in Pompeii. It was then a case of cleaning off the last bits of the mould and then cross-checking it against the OEM part. Now I need to sort out this thumb. To do this, we're going to have to do some orthopaedic surgery. Considering the state of the synovial interphalangeal joint, we are going to complete Kirschner wire athrodesis. In preparation for the procedure, hyperhidrosis was induced in the patient to reduce fluid content. The damaged articular surface and the osteophyte of the phalangeal condyle of the finger were prepared for the procedure. A Kirschner wire of the appropriate diameter was selected and measured, extending to the distal phalanx. A drill was applied to the interphalangeal joint to create an entry point with the trajectory planned to accommodate the K-wire fixation. With the K-wire set in the centre of the medullary canal, the distal phalanx was then prepared with a biocompatible adhesive and manually pushed proximally to compress the athrodesis junction. Evaluation of the radiographic outcomes and the functional outcomes using the visual analog scale for pain concluded that the athrodesis union was successfully achieved. Nah, I think I f***ed it up. After I corrected that little issue, the plaster was feeling a bit doughy still and needed to dry more, so I set up some infrared lights. These are pretty handy and can be cheaply obtained from the top socket of these poles at most intersections. To get more heat into it, I realised that the searchlight reflector I had made in my previous video was also the perfect light reflector, so I could then heat both sides at once. We need it to look more lifelike. Kristen is really good at mixing up paints and whipped up a jar of skin. We tested it on the plaster bottle cast from earlier, and now I reckon it looks a lot like a cake, but no one else was buying it. She started layering it on the arm, and it was looking really good. Then the final touch for realism was the addition of some arm hair, just to remind me of what my arm looked like before the plaster waxing. And that's all looking really good. Maybe too good. I think I've actually captured all my biometric details in plaster. At least I'll then be able to fingerprint unlock my phone if I ever go out and forget my hand. So, I don't know how, but I've completely messed up the pose while my hand was getting wrapped in plaster, and the phone doesn't even fit. Literally, the single function it was meant to do, it doesn't even do. Thinking about the problem, it turns out that human skin is slightly compressed when it touches anything, and plaster doesn't do that, so the grip is now too small. I did find that an older, smaller phone fitted in there perfectly, but ultimately I want it to be able to hold any phone, so to work around this, I'm just going to use a magnet mount, which is actually quite good, because then I can adjust the angle of the phone in the hand. It has a car air vent clamp, which I can bore into the hand. It was kind of tricky working out the right position so the plaster fingers could still operate the power button and volume. But then it was just a case of drilling a hole to suit. But drilling into a genetically identical looking version of my hand did trigger some weird fight or flight responses in my brain. With that done, it's then just a case of taking a hit of that sweet party plaster and then gluing in the magnet mount. And now it looks like some kind of biological version of the Iron Man hand. We can now attach a car to this disembodied arm. Now in working out the position, it looks like there are some rules to consider with the use of phone cradles, the main one being that it doesn't visually obstruct your view of the road, which makes sense, especially when I see people who pretty much have their phone set up like this. But it also has to be securely mounted and not obstructing any of the controls of the car or airbags. So basically don't do this, because if your airbags go off, you'll have to use the dangly thing at the back of your throat to unlock your phone. I cut up some aluminium for it and made up a secure mounting platform for the base. A bit of a twist and a couple of bolts, and we have ourselves a cannibal popsicle. The YouTube algorithm is going to be really confused about what this video is about. I'm going to drill and bolt this into the center console. When doing this, make sure there are some wires where you're drilling, as the copper will protect the drill from damaging the carpet underneath. Alright, the bottom will be secure, but I don't really want to drill the dashboard for the top. But luckily this car comes with this cool tangerine holder. Using a piece of plastic, which I obtained from a larger piece of plastic, my thought is I can slot this into the dashboard for stability, which completely did not work because it's as flimsy as my ability to get videos out on time. As a stronger alternative, I then remembered there are these holes in the stereo which are normally used to top up the car's audio fluid. A bit of rod in there will make a great anchor point, so I drilled a hole in there and gave my arm some disturbing acupuncture, then a spot of glue. Then we can put that there and pivot the arm spike into the stereo and tighten up the bolts. As strong as. Plus it doesn't illegally interfere with any of the controls of the car, like the steering, the difficulty selector, or the replay lever. I just need to tickle the elbow to change the volume, but I have lost tangerine function. Then the phone snaps in beautifully onto the magnet, and there we go. That phone position's actually perfect. But I'm really loving the overall look of it. It kind of freaks my brain out, especially being an exact replica of my own arm and hand. From the front, with no one in the car, I love that it looks like the car's checking its own text messages. But now we should check out how it looks from above. In daylight, that matches my hand quite well. And then in infrared, that looks pretty damn good. The hand shape and the pose are perfect and should confuse AI. The paint still looks a little bit too light in infrared, but having said that, it should make it more obvious to a human reviewer that something's not quite right. You know, there's that, and the fact that it looks like there's a human trapped in my gearbox who's trying to reach up for phone reception. I love that I'll also be able to use this as a driving assist feature, and for scratching my knob. And this would be a fun mounting position, but kind of breaks a few other laws. I've also moved the car back a bit to simulate the low angle it captures of you, and that looks pretty good too. Before we try this on the road, I've realised we may have hit a possible snag. So we know you can't use your phone while driving, but there's another law, Regulation 264, the use of visual display units, which basically says screens can't be visible to the driver unless it's an aid like navigation, which can be visible if you don't touch it, and only if the mounting is commercially designed and manufactured for that purpose. Well, this build is definitely made for that purpose, but just to cover ourselves for commercially, which is generally defined as able to be bought and sold by people, my arm is now a product, which currently has a production run of 1 unit with no more planned at this stage. I did up some studio product photography to advertise our new hand phone holder. I made up a web page for it on my existing website. I wasn't sure what to call our new product. It's a hand for driving, and it was a big job to make it, so I went with driver's hand job. I know you're probably tempted to look up the product page. Small tip, maybe don't do it on your work computer. We've got our product description and all of the features. I've priced it at $2,500 based on the construction time and the physical pain in making it. Plus there's the extra value as it comes with free DNA so you can clone me. But you may be wondering, how did I achieve such a smooth cinematic craning shot here? Not with the camera accessory, but with the E7 Plus Standing Desk from today's sponsor FlexiSpot. Standing desks have been around for a while now, and are great for people like me who get to a point in their day where they need to move into any position other than sitting. But the difference with this desk is it's a rock-solid 4-legged standing desk, which is way more stable than the 2-legged versions, which can shake around almost as much as that wide-cutting hedge trimmer I made. Compared to the 2-legged standing desks on the market, which usually have a lift capacity of around 90 kilograms, this is a beast and can lift up to 200 kilograms, all while being smooth enough to get craning camera shots like this. It'll lift me up no worries at all, so now I have a scaffold to change light globes in the shed, or an elevated work platform in the house where I can enjoy the top edge of picture frames which I've previously been missing out on. Yeah, I really didn't expect it to go as high as this, but it will sit steadily at 131 centimeters, making it the highest 4-legged desk you can get on the market. The height of its 3-stage legs can be adjusted on the touch keypad manually, and there are 4 buttons where you can save your own height presets. Numbers are for smart people, and pictures are for me. It's honestly a bargain compared to other brands that I've seen, which can be over $1,000 on the Australian market. But the E7 Plus is also covered with a 15-year warranty, which is great peace of mind with anything mechanical. FlexiSpot is about to have their early bird Black Friday sale, so don't miss out on the chance to get your own E7 Plus 4-leg standing desk. If you have a limited budget, you can also choose their E7 Premium desk. Use my code on the screen to get $50 off your purchase. I've put a link in the description below. Thanks to FlexiSpot for supporting this video. So with that all questionably cleared up, I hit the road to try out our new phone holder. Overall, I reckon that looks pretty good. That position's perfect, can see over it, holds the phone up nice and high. Only regret is I didn't put a charge cable. If I had a cable coming out of the wrist, that would have been great. After a bit of driving around town, the phone hand holder hadn't fallen off the dash and slapped me in the nuts once. So that means we're ready to give this a test and drive through the freeway AI phone detection camera. I'm going to do a night test to begin with because I want to film it in infrared. Alrighty, hands on the wheel. Here we go, think we're coming up to it right here. Now I couldn't see any flash as we went through it, but looking back in infrared, it's pretty obvious. As we approach, you can kind of see there's an earlier photo taken of me. Then my second photo. A bit closer, the other camera captures the car next to me, and then as we go directly under, there's a big bright flash looking straight down on my third arm, and also our phone holder. I then went through the second safety camera setup, doing the exact same thing with my hands clearly on the steering wheel. So we have 2 tests in the bag. I didn't want to do too many tests back to back, because it might not be an accurate test if the same bloke gets flagged over and over. But I did go back a few days later, and went through during the day, which I didn't get a chance to video, but I've recreated with my amazing CGI skills. But really then it was just a case of playing the waiting game, as the notices can take up to a month to come through. However, in the meantime, I got curious about what other regular things that AI might get confused over. Like, will AI be confused by my new Craig arm dash mat? Because I reckon human skin is a perfect way to protect your vehicle interior from harmful UV. I drove in and gave it a go. Now I reckon you deserve a fine if you're out driving without a seatbelt on with a baby on your lap, but then thinking about it, I started to get concerned about whether I would get a fine too if I'm out driving around in my favourite life-size baby print t-shirt. Kristen and I then headed out to give it a go. Alright, here we go, going through it now. But since doing these tests with the printed arms and t-shirt, I realised I may have wasted my time. After a bit of digging online, I found the actual patent for the system. It appears it captures both night and daytime in narrowband infrared. They do this to avoid glare from sunlight and also your dad's freeballing white nutsack. You know, you gotta stay comfy on those long drives. But what does that mean for our printouts? Alright, so this is how our hand printouts look with visible light, but if we turn the light off and then switch to infrared, that is how it looks in infrared, just a big white shape. And then it's the same thing with our baby print t-shirt. Turn off the visible light and switch to infrared, the baby has disappeared. It's just a white t-shirt. But in infrared, our plaster hand looks real. But this is my hand. But you get the idea. So you probably won't get fined for human arm dash mats and baby print t-shirts, which leaves us with the plaster hand as the only possibility of tricking the freeway robots. And now that we know it captures in infrared, maybe my light coloured clothing in the background makes a phone less obvious. I figured we should do one more test wearing something that was dark. Also this time, rather than having both of my hands clearly on the steering wheel, I'm going to drop one arm down like this, which should be a lot more convincing to the AI, yet fairly obvious to a human reviewer. I then headed out to give it a final test. With a random bit of luck, one of the mobile trailers was reported only half an hour away from my house, so we can not only get another test in, but we can see if the trailers operate any different.
Police reported ahead.
Here we go. Here it is here.
There we go, multiple shots captured of the hand phone holder. So the trailer really sneaks up on you on a country road at night, but in infrared you can just see it flickering in the distance. So I thought we're done with our photo booth experience for the night, but then like a shark revealing itself from the murky water, there was another trailer. They bloody double trailered me. Thinking about it, it makes sense because the mobile trailers don't have sensors in the road. So they're using two trailers to measure the time gap to see what speed people are doing. But I thought it was a good opportunity to take the hand phone holder down and loop back around and get some more footage. And having a look in slow motion, you get an idea of how many images it captures. There's the first one to get the license plate, then there's the second one of the driver's face, and then there's a third one that's looking down into the car. And then a final one of the back of the car, in case you've hit the cruise control, climbed out the window onto the back of the car, and you're riding it Yoda style. So what happened? Well, what an adventure we've had. We learned ancient plaster techniques, a bit of orthopedic surgery, and that slow and sustained hair removal is way more painful than I ever imagined. But we also did something about cameras or some shit. So at the time of finishing this video, I'm yet to receive anything in the mail. So we're left with a few possibilities. The first one is maybe the AI didn't even detect me, maybe because the hand holder just was never obvious enough in the shot. The second possibility, it did detect me but humans reviewed it, possibly because of the bad press recently, but that would mean the system does actually work. Possibility number 3, maybe our first more obvious tests were detected by the AI, but a human reviewer then flagged my number plate as always double check this dickhead because he keeps trying to wind up the safety cameras, which would make all of my later tests void. Or the fourth possibility, nothing's arrived yet because it's only been about 3 weeks and there's a $1,000 fine on its way or court appearance where I'm going to have to try and explain what my driver's handjob is. I will update you all if anything comes through in the future, but for now, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe. Always a big thanks to my Patreons, and I'll catch you all next time. So have a look at these jumpers. Have a guess which one is black. They're all black. So it turns out in infrared, I only own one piece of clothing that is actually black.